During the past few podcasts, we have reviewed the silent generation, baby boomers and Gen X, each uniquely shaping our world and in many ways feeding each other as they progressed. In this final podcast of the series, we come full circle to the 21st century and the generations forming our society today. The Millennials, Gen Z, and Generation Alpha. All right, they're all three modern generational cohorts defined by distinct birth years, cultural experiences, and technological influences. We've been doing these magnificent programs on generational wisdom and voices through time. And this is our final program. And I think it's only fitting that I have a guest today who many of you may know or may not know, who's intricately involved with the production of this program. He's my friend and my producer, and his name is Mike DiCioccio. And he is a perfect example of those people who are represented in this program. He's a member of Gen Y, and he is a businessman, a producer, a podcast host, and very important to him, a parent. And I think these are the types of things that bring together this generation in such a magnificent way. So, Mike, thank you so much for joining our show today. It's I know you're happy to do it because you're, as you just told me, on both sides of this now. You're speaking and producing. Welcome to the show.
Carl, thank you so much. I'm going to brown nose everybody a little bit. I got to give Carl some love. I've been able to work with him now for a couple of years producing this show. And so what I want to do is just stop everybody and say thank you for being along the ride here, along the journey, along life's journey, for 135 episodes. So congratulations, Carl, on the longevity of that. I know it's not easy. You consistently are finding great guests on the show and putting out great content. But yeah, it's really cool to be on both sides of this. I get to be on the show and produce the show with our team at Social Chameleon. Got to give them some love. Couldn't do it without them. But I'm really excited to be on the show today because I feel like millennials, Gen Y, right? We have a really cool perspective. We're kind of like the middle child or the youngest of three when you think about generations. So my parents are baby boomers. I got to experience my grandparents, and I was blessed to spend time with them on both sides of our family. They came over from Italy, right? So immigrants from Italy came over, and our family was raised in the Buffalo, New York area. You can see them rocking the Bills hat. But so I got to experience kind of the silent generation for my grandparents, the boomer generation for my parents. Our household kind of skipped Gen X, but I had cousins that were Gen X that I was very close to. So they kind of represent in the generational breakdown, kind of like the first child, right? They were kind of left alone, very independent. Hey, latchkey kids, you come home at dinner time or whatever. Parents barely knew what the kids were doing, running around, playing outside, right? They were that generation of go get dirty, very similar to the boomer generation. I got to talk to my dad about him playing on the sand lot. So I got to experience that kind of secondhand of that's what it was like growing up in the 60s, right? 50s and 60s for my dad. And then Gen X got to kind of do the same thing. They were that first generation of big wheels and bikes and just, get yourself to and from school. And it didn't matter what the weather is, by the way. So I feel kind of like a millennial today that's going to be sitting here talking a little bit to the younger generation. My daughter today just got off of school for a little bit of wintry mix. She got a half day of school for wintry mix. Okay, I just told you, Carl, I know you grew up in Brooklyn, so you had the elements, but in Buffalo, wintry mix is just called winter. It's called Tuesday.
Snow days.
And we had, we would wait at the bus stop with feet of snow and the bus would just trek through it. So it's kind of funny when I see, and I think it's a generational thing. I think now we're more mindful of kids waiting at a bus stop or being out in the elements. And I think it's a good thing, but I do have to laugh at it at the same time because, I'm in that middle, like I said, kind of feel like the middle child of these generations where I got to see my parents who literally told the story of walking to school, uphill both ways with a quarter in their hand and would turn green by the time they got to school. I got to hear that. And then that quarter would pay for lunch for multiple days and the whole deal. To my daughter, going to school remotely on an iPad when she gets to sit in her bedroom and do school because it's a wintry mix. So I'm in the middle of all that. And I just like to hit on a couple things that are really cool from my experience, if you give me the floor to do so.
That's why you're on the show, to give us that wisdom. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this is a young man who I will ask the question, and I'm sure he's prepared to answer. How did it mold, and what did the times of your life help mold you, the things in your culture and your society? But he also has had the experience of being a host on multiple hundreds of podcasts. So he's had the experience of many people feeding into him. So it's going to be very important for him to tell us what his story is, because it's going to be mixed with other people's stories. Okay, Mike, you're on.
I appreciate you saying the word how it molded me, because it did shape me, and I feel it's a privilege. I'm just, maybe everybody who's from their own particular generation feels, you feel it's like your brothers and sisters. You grew up together, so you feel it. You're a part of it. So obviously, maybe you'd favor it. That might not be the right word, but for me, I think just from standing in an outside looking in perspective, what was really great about being part of the Millennials, like I just said earlier, is when you think about 1,000 years, and we're talking about, America celebrating 250 years. So we can even just talk about the 250-year history of our own country. What has happened in the last 40 years? And yes, I'm hitting my 40th birthday in the next month. What has happened, Carl, in the last 40 years that you got to experience, right? You got to see the 40 years previous and the 40 years, including the millennial. And I think what has happened has been monumental. And that word doesn't even do it justice. What I mean by that is I grew up in the late 80s. So what did we have? We had a television on the ground, as you know, and at the time they had about 5 to 13 channels, and you got up with the dial. So when I was like 3 years old, to change a channel, which I wasn't allowed to do, your parents were the only ones who can operate this thing, but there was a dial on it. Okay. Then we got the big brick remote control for the TV. We graduated from that to having HBO and pay-per-view. And I can remember all of our cousins and my brother and my dad and uncle sitting around pay-per-view watching Hulk Hogan body slam Andre the Giant. I was like a year old. I could barely remember it, but I remember how I felt experiencing everyone yelling at the TV, and the Bills 4 Super Bowl losses in a row, and the Yankees 4 championships that followed right behind it. Polarizing childhood. I'm telling you, man, I got to experience the lows and the highs of my teams winning. So, but I keep talking about the technology side, and I really want to focus on that, because to make a phone call to get together with a buddy, I had the phone hanging on the wall with the cord. You could stand 3 to 6 feet away from the thing. The whole family shared that phone. It was a big deal to make a phone call. When the internet finally comes rolling around, as you know, it took up the phone line. That was a big deal. You're going to check your, go on. We didn't really check email because it wasn't like a personal thing back then, but it was mostly like, are you going to hop online after school? This is what we did. You get off that school bus, you head home. The first thing every kid did from about middle school age, 6th grade to probably 9th grade, is you hopped online and you went to AOL Instant Messenger to continue the conversations from the school bus,
right,
or maybe talk to friends that were at different schools that you didn't see during the day. So I got to experience that, and it just gave me an appreciation, because having 3 channels when I was a kid to then, we had the regular cable box with hundreds of channels and options. My family, my dad worked very hard at the Ford stamping plant, and we were a blue collar family. And we had nice Christmases. We had some nice things that he worked very hard for. When we got that the 1990s flat screen that was like 4 feet wide, and it took 6, sumo wrestlers to deliver it. We had that. So like when the Super Bowls were on, my uncle was the first to get it. So we went to his house to watch it on the big screen at the time. I got to see all the adaptations and iterations of technology, literally from having it barely work to, wow, this is great, to what we have today is ridiculous in a 40-year time frame. And now we'll kind of kick ahead. You want me to tell you a little bit about how it's molded me as a person, and I'm getting there. But having those experiences really allowed me to appreciate. The big word I want to take away from this conversation is having an appreciation for the people who came ahead of us, my grandparents, my parents, the technology and advancements. What we have today is not taken for granted. I don't think millennials take it for granted, because we got to see the Gen X passing the torch to us with what they didn't have and what they then did have. And what our kids now who are alpha they don't know a difference of a world, their world, everyone has an iPhone, an iPad, and TV with pick whatever show you want and you get it, right? That's what my 10-year-old daughter Izzy gets to experience. She doesn't understand standing in a Blockbuster and the whole family has to pick one film to bring home. So Friday night could be fun and we could enjoy it. And so last couple of things I'll say about the technology side is when you think about it, not that long ago in our country, if you wanted to get wisdom, or if you and I wanted to start a business and we were in our early 20s, we would go to the library. We would have to do research and maybe talk to other entrepreneurs and do kind of the Think and Grow Rich method with Napoleon Hill, where he interviewed like 500 entrepreneurs and took all their collective thought and put it into almost like a business Bible. And you would have to read a book like that to get it. Now we have the internet, touch of a button, 3 seconds, we get all the information we need, which is a beautiful thing. It could be a scary thing too. But on the good side of it is, when you and I want to start a brand new business today, Carl, I know you're in your 80s, I'm just about to hit 40. We could do that together at a touch of a button. You're in Florida, I'm in Philly right now as we record this, and we could start planning it in seconds. Where, 100 years ago, it would take days just to get to the same library together and plan that event.
We could not only plan it in seconds right now, but we can go online if we didn't have adequate funds and do a GoFundMe thing or pitch it to different organizations and get the funding that we needed.
It's all around the world.
Entirely all around the world. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I literally grew up, we had cousins and family in Italy that, we'd write handwritten letters to, and Christmas cards are beautiful now because it still has a little bit of that traditional feel.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got to experience all of that and it was really interesting. And from a school age, I want to share this too. Like the first computers we had were basically word processors, as you remember them, like the late 80s machines. And then the iMac came out and they looked cool, but they weren't much better at the time as far as what they did. They were very basic. And I remember my uncle, I had a cool perspective because he grew up in Buffalo with us. And then he went out to LA and he became a professional digital recordist for like major motion pictures and basically recording like the big orchestras that you hear in a film for the score. But he would go out there and when he was working, we'd ask him, what he's working on. And he told us like everybody's using Mac and Pro Tools was just like coming out. And I remember telling him like, we have Macs in our library. He's like, yeah, that's not going to be the same kind of device, but my friends and stuff were kind of like Macs stink at the time because they were just like a dinosaur machine. And within a flip of a switch around the time the first iPhone came out and Apple became a cool brand and every school then had the newest, latest, greatest. And the big change was the network. The speed of the network changed. And when that took off, that's when really computing became a whole different ballgame. And so I got to appreciate it because I'm typing on that first word processor. If you're lucky, you get to play Oregon Trail, right? In school, you had like the one game that was on every computer. And then I'll share one other thing too is, remember Christmas morning, I think it was 1992, we got our first video game system, Sega Genesis, which was a big deal at the time. And my cousins had Atari, Carl, which was, the predecessor. And so I got to play basic Pong. Remember Pong and the ET video game, which is known to be like the worst video game of all time because they rushed it for Christmas to try to sell it while the movie was hot. To these games you see today where a lot of people, you'd watch a TV screen, you don't know if you're watching a video game or a movie, is how great the graphics have become. Right. And so I have an appreciation to see. I remember sitting there with a joystick playing Pong and ET. And now if I wanted to play Xbox with my daughter, the way the graphics and the gameplay is so different in 35, 40 years where it's like, she doesn't know any better or any different, but I get to share that with her. And it's really cool to have that. So when we talk about advancements and developments and what's going on with technology, and now AI is like speeding it up. We just talked about 40 years. AI did about 40 years of development in the last 4 days, you know?
Right.
So it's just cool. Now, how I'll share this impacts me as a person, as a business person, even as a parent, is there's no shortage of information today. So really what that means to me is there's no excuse to not find out the solution. You don't have to be an entrepreneur to have that mindset.
Right.
If you're dealing with something as a parent, if you're dealing with something and you're a W-2, you have the ability to watch YouTube videos, to do it yourself, figure it out. And we have that at the touch of a button. So whenever I'm in a group chat and someone has a question nowadays, I hope this doesn't sound pompous, but if someone's like leaves it where they don't have a solution, I'm like,
Yeah.
find it. Like we find it in 5 seconds. I'll just Google it,
That's right.
Or you see someone post on social media and they're like, I don't know if this is true or whatever. And it's like, you could find out in 3 seconds if you wanted by Googling it. So we live in a time where there's really no excuse to be resourceful and figure it out. You mentioned it, like if you need to funds or whatever it might be for your business, to get resourceful. Now, podcasting is something I happen to fall in love with from a consumer first. And so this is a pretty cool thing where when they came out, it wasn't a household term. When I mentioned I started a podcast, about 80% of the people I told that to were like, is that the thing Joe Rogan has? That was all they knew is one guy, right? And I'd be like, yeah, that's what Joe Rogan's on. It's called a podcast. And it's like, well, what is it? I think it's an internet radio show everybody can listen to on their computer or phone, right? And it's not something you have to wait to 4 p.m. to tune into Mike's show. You just put it on whenever you want. It's always on demand. I'm like, this is a great thing. So as a sales rep, before I owned Social Chameleon, I was in sales. You know my story a little bit, Carl, but I was driving around from house to house selling insurance, or when I worked as a store manager, in and out of the store every day. And that short commute, I'd get, 8, 10, 20 minutes of a podcast episode. And what was really cool about that is I get to choose what I'm putting into my think tank, right? So, I love music and I still listen to music in the car, but I get to choose when I want to get new information and learn. There's the best minds in the entire world sharing it mostly for free. Again, no excuses to not get further ahead in life. Like my parents grew up with immigrant parents that could barely speak English, didn't know the lay of the land. They figured it out. So for me to have an excuse, like my grandparents came over here, they didn't even know one person. How the hell did they figure it out? And now I'm going to sit over here and have a bad day because my internet's down. Like I'm not going to allow that to stop me from moving forward. So, and also just the fact that, they figured it out in a much different world and mentality of the grind was different. I remember my alarm when I was a kid was my dad eating cereal in the morning before he'd leave for work around 6 o'clock in the morning. Because I don't know why he did this, but he used to hit the spoon on the bowl when he was getting that last scoop. Yeah. So we knew dad was leaving, and then dad was coming home when he heard the garage door open at 4 or 5 o'clock.
So it sounds and taps that alerted you.
If I hear that, I go right back to that moment. Now, dad was a disciplinarian in the family. So mom was a sweetheart, a mama's boy. And we grew up in that Italian household where, mom cooked, she took care of the family. She worked a little bit when we were young, but once we were older, the 3 kids, that was her main responsibility. Dad went and worked. And he was the one who would put his foot down. So whenever I heard that garage open, your back would straighten out and you better be on your best behavior. But we all loved our dad, and rest in peace to my dad, and passed away in 2020. But I learned a lot of really great things from him. Like he introduced me to the Three Stooges, Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis. Yeah. My mom introduced me to the Beatles and Led Zeppelin. I mean, there's a handful of classic. What would the world be without any of those people I just mentioned? Right. You mentioned, I think it was off camera. Was it off camera? Sinatra we were talking about? Or was it on camera? Yeah, Sinatra. I grew up having an appreciation for everybody we just talked about, and it really molded me, as you said. I'm going to say the greatest generation musically, I would say, is the boomers, because they brought, and even the generations that preceded that, because what's really cool is growing up in the 80s and 90s, a lot of my favorite music took classic rock, early rock and roll, British Invasion, stuff like, Elvis Presley, and they took it and they molded it again into something different. So whether or not you like 90s alternative or grunge, but you could tell the influence from what came earlier. And that's a lot of the music I really love and appreciate. So musically, the boomers really passed the torch.
Clearly, all of these things that preceded helped to shape you into the man you are today. I could hear your passion when you're talking about technology, and I hear your passion when you're talking about the music, because it was all part of your life as you lived it. And that's
Hmm.
very, very clear in who you are and how you parent your child. It's all part of the passion as a person. And I'm happy to say, as a silent generation, looking at all these generations that followed me, the one thing that
Hmm.
I see is the weave throughout is that there is always this drive in mankind to to attach to something that they find beautiful, to make it great in their lives, to share it with other people, to expose their children to it. That seems to be a common thread that runs through all the generations. And I hear it in you in your
Hmm.
conversation right now.
I think the best place to be is have an appreciation, not just to have it, but to really dive into it and learn from your parents. If you're blessed to have your grandparents around still, talk to them, listen to them, hear what they went through, right? And now the grandparents are the boomers, right? And some of them are even Gen Xers are grandparents now. So I encourage anyone from Alpha, like this is not a I'm on a pedestal and Carl's on a pedestal from his generation, and we're not talking down. What's really cool is have a perspective where you can learn from what who came and appreciate the people who came before us. And we appreciate you because I'll tell you what, Isabel's taught me things and showed me things in video games I had no idea about because she's now in the mix and I'm, busy doing other things. So she's the one bringing a new game or idea or technology to me and she's the one teaching me and I have an appreciation for it. And so I think, I feel like millennials was kind of that first generation that was maybe looked down upon, like, oh, they got it easier because of all this other stuff. And at least that's how it felt when I was growing up. It was kind of the rolled eyes, like, oh, the millennial generation, even considered lazy and stuff. And maybe there's some truth to it because, I think the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. Like there's an extreme and there's an extreme, and the truth is kind of in the middle. But I feel like our generation, once understood, can be appreciated at a greater level, and that goes for Gen Alpha as well. And I encourage anybody who maybe thinks, "Oh, this generation is soft" or whatever, like get to know them because don't generalize everybody off of maybe one experience you have.
Absolutely. You're going to find good and bad in every generation, as you do in all people. There will be some
Right.
people in your generation that will never treat themselves to the experience of growing and reaching out. They're just going to stay where they are. But many, many more will experience the growth that they're going to deliver to this world. Your
Hmm.
generation and the generations that follow are developing what the future of this world will be. And it's only through the excitement of young people like yourselves who want to reach out and do. I mean, you look at Elon Musk. He's maybe the extreme, but he dreams about what's possible and then figures out how to make it happen. And that's true
Right.
throughout your generation. I think that's
And I'm going
wonderful.
to use him as a good example as we wrap up here. Like Elon is a polarizing figure. He got involved in politics, and a lot of people who didn't agree with those politics kind of, I
Yeah.
hate this term, but I'm going to use it like threw the baby out with the
Yeah.
bathwater, that kind of thing. And to me, it's like any person, there's going to be good you can take from that person and their experiences. Like an author, you read their book, maybe it's a 200-page book, but there's 5 things you can learn from it that take
Absolutely.
away and make your
Absolutely.
life better. But there's
Absolutely.
chapters that you don't agree with or just
Right.
seem a little bit
Right.
gray, whatever. They're kind of mundane. Take the good and roll with it.
And
Like
so,
Elon's done a lot of great things that people can take and learn and be inspired by, and maybe things that you're like, I don't care about that. But take the good and realize we're in a time where we can learn from it. I'm going to wrap up with this podcasting, what it means to me, and it's part of the generation is that, I'm of a generation where these things just started to exist, about 15 years ago. And to everybody knows what a podcast is today. Every sports team, news station, radio station, TV, whoever you are, influencer, entrepreneur, their company has a podcast. It's a way of communicating, and it's a beautiful thing for a couple of reasons. Number one, when I grew up, I mentioned the 3 or 4 channels we had. You had NBC, CBS. If you're lucky, maybe you would get like a CNN or Fox or something. I don't even know if Fox News was around then. But my point is, you had like 3 or 5 options, which meant you had a very direct message coming from you without alternative opinions or thoughts. So it's like we were getting kind of I don't want to say brainwashed, but we were getting one singular message many times. Now you have millions of opinions, and you got to be careful because not all of them are truth, but you have the ability to go and seek out the truth and information and learn from people that you connect with. We're not only given a couple options. So that's a beautiful thing. Still go out and find the truth. I think our generation is really a big proponent of being able to do that. YouTube videos. There's people who are, what's the word? When you're debunking myths or, finding truth in something that was thought to be false, whatever it might be. It's a beautiful time to be alive because you can actually get to the bottom of it now. There's research there. And the other part of it is, Carl, you talked about it at the beginning of this interview. I get the opportunity to interview people like yourself. You've been on my podcast and over 260 now other incredible people all around the world. And really, I'm just learning from them. I'm interviewing them and getting out of the way and like learning how they did it. So then we can take what they taught in that episode, the insights, and apply some of it to our own life. We're not going to be able to take the whole hour conversation and apply all of it, but 1, 2, 3 things you can take away and actually improve your life with. Like, that's why podcasting to me is such a special thing, because without the ability to just connect with someone virtually and hear from them and learn from them and be inspired by them, like, I definitely know I wouldn't have the same perspectives as I have today. I'd be thinking the same way I did maybe 20 years ago. And every day we really should be moving forward. Don't live the same. My advice to anyone tuning in, don't live the same year after year after year, right? Right. Age is a number, but also don't be the same person at 39 as you are at 49. Like,
hopefully not.
Your interest, the things you learn, the people that in your surrounding circle can change and adapt. And that's the beauty. Look, you're blessed to have 82 years now.
83
circling around
going on 4.
83. I'm losing track of you, Carl. Guys, Carl at 83 years old has more energy. I've seen him. He's helping run a restaurant and he's a partner and all that. The energy you have, Carl, it's no surprise. I know you're humble, but you have a very successful background, and I'm not surprised by it because you're someone who I can tell learns from people around you, asks questions, and the number one thing you've done is take action on it. You're not just a thinker, you're a doer. Okay. And I've learned that from you.
I have to tell you, he's speaking his own words here, because many of you who watch this show know that I wrote a book years ago. And after writing the book, it became an Amazon bestseller. And the publicist says, you got to go on interviews. And the first person that interviewed me online was this guy here. And they said, he's got a podcast. And I said, what's a podcast? I didn't know what it was. And now from one podcast host to another, thank you for being on the show.
135 episodes of Along the Way Life's Journey later. Yep. Thanks, Carl. I really appreciate you having me on.
I love you, man. Thank you so much.
Love you too.
Thanks.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, Aaron. Born approximately between 1981 and 1996, Millennials came of age as the internet and social media emerged. They are noted for their familiarity with technology, facing major economic events like the Great Recession and often experiencing slower economic advancement than previous generations. Work-life balance and career growth are valued strongly. Millennials can be characterized by their adaptability and resourcefulness in challenging economic climates. So I'd like to take a moment and introduce a millennial guest, husband and wife, David and Katie Barry. Welcome to our show.
Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be with you, Carl. We were looking forward to it.
I'm so glad. So as I've told you before, this show is basically, I call it Voices Through Time. Different generations speaking about things that have helped to shape them as they grew older and they grew up, and what it was that impacted you in such a way that helped to make you the person you are today. And what would you like to share with us about that?
Well, I guess I'll go first and I'll let Katie chime in with me. We have very similar stories and kind of how we were brought up and came about because we actually grew up together. We grew up at the same church. We've been friends since we were about 12 years old, and we've been married for 11 years now. We're a product of strong parents who knew what kind of children they wanted to raise and of a church community that was around us. So, for example, my family very much shaped who I ended up being. My dad was a developer and a chemist for a company, and my mom is a biologist by training, but decided not to become a doctor because she wanted to be a mother. And so she raised me and my two brothers. So we went to church every Sunday morning. We went back to church every Sunday evening. We went to church on Wednesday nights for our prayer meeting, and we were there just about every time the doors were open. And that created not just a family community, but a church community that was just one circle farther out. And it became a really shaping one and a strong one. My dad passed away a long time ago. In 1999, he was killed in a car accident. I was 11. But even many, many years later, people who knew him were commenting that I was just like him, even though he'd been passed away for most of my life. That church and family community was really shaping for me. And I think Katie would say something similar, that their family model was shaped around the church as the community that they wanted Katie to be brought up in. Is that about right?
Yeah. I feel like our church was the hub of not just our spiritual well-being, but also like our social, our social hub. And I didn't know any different. So, and I don't think it was until getting married, moving away, and not having to choose our church, choose your friends, and all of that I realized how impactful that had been. Just, it wasn't even a thought. It was, oh, this is our family and our friends. And
yeah. So, for example, Katie and I have had this conversation in the last 5 years or so. You know, you get older and you meet other people and you realize that not everybody lives the same way that you do, and so on. And like, oh, not everybody has a strong church community around them to ground them. Not everybody has encouragement on a week in and week out basis with people whom they can look up to. Oh, what a loss for people who don't have a community around them, or for whom whatever encouragements they have are kind of on the horizontal, but they don't have a spiritual grounding to give them hope.
Right. So you were surrounded by a family of, while you lost your dad, you had all these surrogate adult males around you to help guide you and instruct you. And maybe if you were a little askew off the line, it brought you back a bit, like everybody else, you know. I know I grew up in a family in Brooklyn that were Italian Americans. So I know just what it means to be surrounded by a mass of people who love you and input in you and take the time to let you know that you're loved, but you're also watched. And there are things that they can help you change and move along with in life.
Carl, what you just said a second ago is exactly right. And I preached a sermon about this not all that long ago. I was talking about, my dad passed away when I was 11, but then guys in my church, older men in my church, kind of noticed that here I was fatherless, and the invitations started coming. Hey, David and your brothers, let's go hiking this coming Saturday.
Right. Or,
hey, David and your brothers, let's do this or let's do that. Such that over the last 25 years or so, I can count on, I could just start listing names of men who have noticed, and kind of, you can never really replace a lost father, but you can have contributions that dad might have done in different ways. I've had a lot of mentors who are older men, and I'm really thankful for kind of the spiritual fatherhood that can come from being in a good church and community.
Yeah. And that must have helped a lot. Katie, I know that you have a good sized family and you're close, and you were raised on a farm environment, right? So that you are very close to your family. And so when the two of you had to leave that environment and move to South Florida because of the assignment in this church, it must have been, you must have had to realize that you were going away from them, but you were bringing values that they implanted into you with you to help you make that change, because that's a big change. They say that some of the most traumatic things in life are when a person changes home or loses a job, or a child and that kind of thing. And you've had to experience those things long distance without that immediate family very close to you, but still with you nonetheless, right?
Right. And then when we were moving here was also the time that we were growing our family. And so, those big hallmark events we were doing kind of all simultaneously. New job, new area away from family, new children.
And you have two beautiful children now that you're wonderful parents to. I've been witnessing it from the outside looking in and kind of envious because my grandchildren or great-grandchildren are not close to me. So I'm kind of a voyeur. I look in and I watch and I enjoy it. And your children are wonderful. I especially like Eli. He's a wonderful little guy. Wonderful.
Eli is such a gift. He is 5 years old. Abigail, of course, is 3 years old. Our two kids. Eli's in kindergarten. He's just started piano and he just loves music. Was it last night, Katie? He wrote a list of like 6 or 10 hymns and he says, I want to start learning these. Can we sing these in our family?
More than that, he made a schedule. He said, this is the hymn we're going to learn. This is the hymn our family is going to sing together in December. This is what we're going to sing together in January.
I should say that's our custom as a family. Around the breakfast table, we sing a hymn and we choose a hymn of the month. And we let each kid choose what verses they want to sing that morning. And that way, over time, they'll learn a lot of good prayers, which is what those hymns are.
You can tell that I love these two people. And one of the things that I wanted to do here today was to have them on the show for a couple of reasons. One of which is I think that when we think about the future of America, we think about our country and the generations that exist today, and people say things that, as I said in the beginning, give a negative impression of all the younger generations. And I guess it's us old farties that say things like that. It's not true. Because if you look at these people, you realize our country's in good hands because they still understand the value of faith, family, and values and traditions. And they live it every day. So now, what do you have to tell the younger generation or any generation? What bit of wisdom would you, that's an interesting thing I just thought of. It's not only the younger generation. If you had a bit of wisdom to tell for some of the older ones that are critical of the younger generations, maybe you can open their eyes to see it's time to look differently.
Well, it's in a sense, it's, wow, who are we to contribute to so much to anybody else? But here's a couple of thoughts. One, it's incredible to me. Katie and I are now in our mid to late 30s. We're both 38. We've got young children. Our days are not really all that remarkable, but we pray together as a family pretty much every day. We worship together as a family every Sunday. The habits that we have put in place that are kind of the structures and staples of our week, I am so pleased that over time, our children are learning to pray, they're learning to sing, and they're seeing their parents make some choices that are formative for the patterns of life. And we're seeing some real benefits from that ourselves.
Yeah.
I guess a comment I'll make for an older generation is just, I personally really benefited when older men took an interest in me. And at the time, I didn't necessarily know how to respond or think about what they were doing. But in retrospect, it's really meaningful to be noticed and cared about. You can pour into people and they might not appreciate it at the time. But man, oh man, does it make a difference to have people who are not in your generation who are invested in you.
And I would add to that, even if the generation ahead that's investing in you, it doesn't have to be in a remarkable way. Like if you're truly a humble person, you don't often think, oh, I'm in a really remarkable stage of life. I think all of us would say my life is pretty ordinary right now or whatever. But I remember when we were newly married, there was a woman, and David was in seminary. There was a woman who was only maybe 10 or 12 years older than me. She had elementary age children. She was just living a busy mom life. I'm newly married. We don't have children. And she just invited me. She said, I would love to get to know you. My days are really busy shuffling kids around. Would you want to just ride around with me while I pick up kids and go to a soccer game with me and we can talk in the car in between? And that was 11 or 12 years ago. And that still has just stuck with me in how, she didn't say, let's try to do something really special. She just said, I want to invest in you, and this is how I have the margin to do it. And it really made an impact on me. And so I would say to the older generation, like, even if you don't think you have that much to give, just give in the way that God has gifted you. And don't try to be somebody else, or wait to invest until you're in a remarkable stage, because that might not ever happen.
When is that going to come along?
I imagine it's your willingness that counts more than anything else.
Yeah.
If you have you're a good heart and you want to reach out and just embrace someone, just by being around them, not necessarily physically, but just by being around them. That's the intent that people see. There's an old saying that says, "What you do speaks so loudly I can't hear a word you're saying." That's true in our gestures as well, how we treat people. I think that's very important, and we let people know we care about them and we're there for them.
Right.
Very important. Well, I appreciate your coming on this show. I'm going to miss you terribly. Ladies and gentlemen, these beautiful people have taken a new assignment back in the Carolinas, very close to where they came from originally. And they're going to impact the generations to come in many ways. I know that. I'm not going to get into details because that's David's story and Katie's story. But I will tell you that I have every confidence they will do wonderful things as we go forward. And I shall miss them. And I know everyone else will miss you also. So I thank you. If there's any last thing you'd like to say before we close off.
Just that we'll miss you as well, but distance does not mean total absence. We'll look forward to spending time together in the future. Thanks for the privilege to come on this podcast, and blessings to you and all of your listeners and viewers. And it was a pleasure to spend a few minutes talking about these things with you, Carl.
Now we'll talk about Gen Z. They were born between 1995 and 2012, generally following the Millennials and preceding Gen Alpha. They are sometimes called digital natives for growing up in a fully internet-connected world. Gen Z shows a preference for purpose-driven work, instant feedback, and a flexible lifestyle, reflecting anxiety and optimism shaped by social media and global events. Members tend to be tech-savvy and diverse, and they experience both pre- and post-social media childhoods, creating a bridge between Millennials and Gen Alpha. So I'd like to introduce our guest for Gen Z, Nick Stanton.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
As I've said a moment ago, I believe you represent Generation Z in a very specific kind of way. We've been seeing a lot of young people on TV and on the news and so forth from both sides of the coin. We've seen a lot of radical kids just this last weekend demonstrating against Turning Point and Berkeley University, doing the usual rah-rah hate stuff. And then we've seen tens of thousands of people responding to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I believe a revival in the church and a revival in patriotism. But I think it's very much alive in your generation, and most people are not aware of that. So that's why I've asked you to come on the show. What do you see as the situations in society today that are helping to shape and mold you as an individual? And how do you think it impacts this country?
So I would say that a couple of things that I'm seeing from my generational perspective that are influencing society and us personally is economics, and as well as social division and unrest. Economically, we see serious issues with our country. Our debt is at $28 trillion, and we have $1 trillion of debt being added every 87 days. And that, to me and to a lot of my generation, is an existential fear on both sides of the aisle, that economic licentiousness, economic issues are going to become an issue for our generation and lead to economic collapse, perhaps. We have the example of Greece a couple of years ago. with their economic collapse. And it could be a prelude if we don't get our economic situation under control as a country to where we could be headed. Now, at a more individual level, our economic situation in terms of the housing market and in terms of food prices is uncertain. We have seen from 2020 to 2022, housing prices in various locales double or even triple in some places. And that's making purchasing a house for people coming of age, which is me, Gen Z, almost impossible and unaffordable. And along with food prices, that is making it difficult for many in my generation to move along with their life, to get married, to have kids. And that is an issue in our society because if people are not getting married and are not having kids, that could lead to a breakdown in our society and our beliefs. Because if you do not have the foundations of the family, of marriage, to guide people and to provide that stable societal foundation, you have the beginnings of societal collapse and societal ruin. For example, the Roman Empire, the first thing to collapse was the family. And because the family collapsed, very quickly thereafter, the politics and the political situation collapsed very quickly around them, culminating with the collapse of the empire in 476 BC.
So I agree with everything you say, and I am thinking about the collapses that were inevitable in the Roman Empire, and I'm seeing a similarity to situations that are occurring in the United States today and an impact on the family and on society. Some of that was manipulated and contrived for political purposes, obviously. And so, back in the 1930s, the German propagandists recognized that the way to take control of the country was to divide the children from the families, the people from their faith, the people from one another, and make the government rule the most important thing in life. And so we've had a little bit of that over the last couple of, actually the last 10 years. There's been those kinds of experiments that were going on, affecting education and how young people think. And I'm sure you were aware of those things, even though you were part of a church and a grounded family and an understanding of what those situations are. Many people around you, I'm sure, of your generation showed you that they were unsure of the future, unsure of their faith, unsure of the things they've been told should believe in. And so that's why I'm so encouraged right now when I see people like you who are taking the initiative to say, okay, education is a wonderful thing, but there are an awful lot of people that are going to college getting these high fancy degrees that they're going to pay for with the student loans for the next 50 years. That won't do them any good because they're not preparing themselves for a real world in the future. But you are. You're a very level-headed, bright young guy, and you've recognized that. So when you talk to young people of your age, not necessarily in your college, because you're in a very conservative college and you're kind of in a cocoon of like thinkers. But when you've talked to people outside of that, I'm sure you're up north now for the first time and you're experiencing cultures up there and people beyond your university that have different type of thinking. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you think is necessary to help young people get back on a track?
So what I see when I talk to people outside of the college is hyper polarization and division politically. While we have always had throughout our history different political parties and different political factions, we're coming to a point in America now where the far left and the far right, no matter which side you end up on, are becoming hyper polarized and pulling away from each other. And what that tends to do is it breaks down any notion of the ability to have a civil discussion, a civil dialogue. And what tends to happen among young people that I encounter outside of the college is they will either be in a far left or a far right, almost type of groupthink. They will be in their own echo chamber. And this is promoted a lot by social media, where you can just scroll past opinions that you disagree with instead of having to concentrate on them and discuss them and rebut them. And what that leads to is people that are just so cemented in their ways and are not open to hearing from the other side or from people that are of an older age that could provide wisdom for them to get them out of that echo chamber, get them out of that groupthink, and help them become a more reasoned, a more grounded person instead of someone that just believes in a fundamental ideology, either left or right.
I understand what that means, and I agree with you because I was raised in a big Italian family in Brooklyn. That means every time we got together at grandpa or grandma's house on a Sunday for a meal, which lasted hours and hours and hours, there was all this discourse back and forth. And some people believe this way, some people believe that way. But the one thing I did learn at a young age, it's always better to have a discussion instead of an argument. Because when you're arguing with each other, you're not listening. You're not hearing the other person's viewpoint. You're predetermined to answer a question before they're even finished talking. And that's what breaks down culture. That's what breaks down society. We have to be able to, you're right. The polarization is a very dangerous thing because when things are polarized, they can't see the center. They only see the opposite, the extension, the extreme. And centralism is very important if you want to come to terms with people. If you want to have an agreement, the way you change the world is one hand reaching out and touching another, one person at a time. That's the way to change the world. So what would you suggest is needed at this point? I know you said social media. I understand you said that there's these massive differences, but do you think these discourses that are beginning to happen around the country where people are speaking out and willing to meet in different environments, like one of the things that I admired so much about Charlie Kirk was that he would go into locations and he knew people disagreed with him. And he would be there to discuss it, not to put them down, but to stand on his principles and what he believed in and be open to discussion back and forth. Do you see anything like that beginning to happen again?
I definitely see the ability and the openness to having discourse among some young people. A lot of people here at the college, going back to that, are open to civil discourse and hearing from the other side, whatever side that they are on. But I do not necessarily know if that is representative of all my generation. Case in point, the death of Charlie Kirk was done by someone who is not open to hearing other perspectives. And I would say that is concerning because if you are not open enough to acknowledge that some points of view that you believe in, that you hold are incorrect, and that you have to take action in order to silence someone by murdering them, that is abhorrent, that is evil, and I denounce that at every point. So I would say that there are young people that are open to that. And I think that we need to foster and encourage that as much as possible because it is our generation that is going to soon rise up into positions of authority and power.
Absolutely.
And we need people that are open to hearing from both sides in order to make a well-grounded and reasoned decision in order to promote the best for us as a society, us as a nation, and us as a world. But to those people that are not open to reason, who are not open to hearing other perspectives, we should not give up on them. We still need to, even though they don't appear to be open to reason, open to hearing the other side, we still need to talk to them. We still need to have some form of discussion with them, even if it is an argument, because that is a start, that is a foundation of opening their mind to other perspectives. And we cannot give up on them. We cannot say that they are a lost cause. We must still continue to talk to them, to help them understand that there are other perspectives outside of their own, and help them to become a more reasoned, leveled individual.
Which means you're saying that you are willing to take a stand, to speak out to people that are contrary to yourself, to be willing to express who you are, and in patience and in, I was going to say Christian love, but just plain love, brotherhood love, accept other people's differences.
Yes.
I think that's such a valid point because I see so many people who live in a cocoon and they only respond to what they have been indoctrinated in. And they're unwilling to stay. I mean, on both sides, they're unwilling to go there and say, let's talk. Let's have a dialogue. Let's open this discussion. And that's what I believe. I think you're right. That's what's necessary. I also, because of who I am, I do this podcast. I write into various newspapers and magazines, and I have articles published because I think it's important to have your views and your position publicized and engage and invite people to discuss it with you. Because if that doesn't happen, and I never get discussion. I mean, at my age, I live in a cocoon. I'm in a very lovely environment where I live. We live in a church that everybody's the same, and I live in a community that's pretty much the same. How am I going to get out to reach people in this world who see things and maybe live differently than I do if I don't step out and speak out? I'm reminded, somebody taught me something a long time ago. We are Christians and we believe in our faith and we believe in God. But Jesus gave us a mandate. He said, go out and tell everybody. Go out and speak the word. I don't think he meant just the gospel. I think he meant go out and speak to people, because I realized a long time ago, if those 12 apostles had looked inward and just stayed that way and not turned around and walked to different parts of the world, there'd be no Christianity today. They had to go out and speak it out. They had to go reach people. And that's what I think we need to do. So what's your advice to the younger generations? There's one that's right after you, the Alpha Gen, and they are coming up very rapidly. And from everything I read, they're going to be endowed with capabilities because of AI and technology that are going to bring them to places in the world that I never thought was possible. Maybe you can conceive of them because you're in a younger generation. But I just find these things so unbelievable that they could be attained. I mean, I sit here today, and as a young boy, when I was younger than you, I would read cartoons about this mythical detective named Dick Tracy, and he would have a phone that could, on his wristwatch, that he can communicate with the world. And we would think, oh, how amazing. And I have an Apple phone today and I can talk to people on my wristwatch. So it exists. So what do you think? What advice would you give to these people coming up?
So I would say to Gen Alpha, especially, with the rise of AI, do not ever put down good research skills, good critical thinking, because ChatGPT cannot think for you. Gronk cannot think for you. It is you as a person that must think and must synthesize these ideas through your own lens, through your own perspective, and come to what you believe is truth. A lot of younger people than me in the Gen Alpha generation just rely on whatever ChatGPT or Gronk says. And all you have to do is input a few different words to get a completely different perspective on the same topic. So it will only serve, if you are not careful, to reinforce this idea of an echo chamber, to reinforce the idea of just getting whatever you want ChatGPT or Gronk to put out to you. So I would say definitely still listen to other people's sides, use critical thinking, develop those skills, but also develop good research skills so that if someone says something that you're like, I don't believe in that, and I cannot believe in that, that you will not reject it out of hand, because that's just being in an echo chamber, but look at their argument critically and say, what truth could there be in this argument? And then analyze it. Perhaps there is a lot of truth there. Perhaps there is no truth there. But in order to determine that, you yourself have to think like they are trying to get you to think. You have to think from their perspective, in their shoes. And that, I think, is being lost with ChatGPT and Gronk and all these other AI tools, because the younger generation is relying on those tools to think for them, to tell them what to think, instead of they themselves thinking for them.
It's pretty dangerous. Right now, there's a lawsuit going on against ChatGPT Companion because of the negative things that they have been providing to teenage kids especially. And there's been a number of suicides as a result of it. It's very, very dangerous. I think also one of the things I would encourage people to recognize today is it's a very dangerous thing to be isolated, to not have spheres of groups of people that allow you dialogue and opportunity to expand and reach for and expose one each other to new things and opportunities. Because when kids, especially teenage kids, isolate themselves and they depend on the social media for their experiences in life and their growth in life, it's a very dangerous thing. They have to have ability to get out there and be with other people. So, Nick, I am so proud of you. I got to tell you, I'm going to say it again. I am very proud of you. You're an amazing young man. I am quite sure you're going to have a remarkable future. And I thank you so much for being part of this program and what we're trying to do. And ladies and gentlemen, when you look at a young man like this and you hear some of the things he's saying and you realize his foundation and who he is, the rock solid foundation that he has, you have great hope that the world is in good hands. We're not going to shrink away. We're not going to die all tomorrow. Whenever Jesus comes back, he comes back. But in the meantime, the future is in the hands of young people like this. So give him a thumbs up, give him a attaboy, and all of his contacts will be below. If you want to send him a note saying you agree with him and you applaud him, do so. If you have a different point of view, I'm sure he's got, you see those shoulders, how big they are? He's got broad shoulders enough to receive them and talk back. So thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you so much. I'll see you at Christmas.
Generation Alpha, born from 2010 to 2024, Generation Alpha are mostly children of the Millennials. They are the first generation fully born in the 21st century. They are described as screenagers and iPad kids, having grown up with digital devices from birth. Gen Alpha is projected to be the largest and most materially endowed generation ever, with strong digital literacy, shorter attention spans due to screen exposure, and a global experience shaped by remote classrooms, streaming services, and that horrible COVID-19 pandemic. Diversity, hyperconnectivity, and new family structures characterize Generation Alpha. They will likely experience a later start to their earning years and household formation. Voices through time. These generations are interlinked, each shaped by and shaping a rapid social, economic, and technological change. Millennials parent Generation Alpha, while Gen Z forms a bridge between old and current cultures, significantly shaping our future. I'd like to introduce our Gen Alpha guest, Miss Luisa Pastorek. This is Luisa Pastorek. She is a student in high school. She's 14 years old, and thank you for joining us because you represent this generation. And I want you to feel comfortable, speak about anything you'd like about this. And one of the things I'd like you to tell us as you're talking about this is, if you were to tell me what was it about your generation that helped to shape you as an individual, or that you think is shaping you for the future, what would you like to tell us about what you believe and maybe your friends from school, anything that you'd like to tell us about that? Enlighten us.
All right. Yeah. I've noticed that around me at school, a lot of people are very much influenced by, of course, the social media, but it's more than that, because it's not only people's lives that they're watching now, which I've noticed that a lot of millennials kind of are very in tune with each other, but it's more like it's just these terrible memes. And it's so interesting because the way that we think is shrinking, because it's like, because what they're trying to do online is harness this attention span and produce as much dopamine as possible. So like you're going to see a whole bunch of these animations and stuff that are just, it's insane. Like, it's not good. And people are just, in my school, they're just like saying things like 6, 7 over and over again because it was on a single meme. Yeah. And it's disrupting things. And they can't stay focused for like 1 second. And I just don't want that to affect more people, because they're comfortable in their jail cell.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that make sense?
So do you think that people use these memes and these animations because they feel inferior in themselves rather than put themselves out there? They have to put up some image that they can latch onto and say, this is me, not this. Do you think that's part of what it is?
The digital age is kind of, everyone's very connected online, but there is like more statistics of like loneliness and depression and all that, especially in the younger generation.
Big
And
problem.
especially because it's so addicting. Like
Yeah.
they've just, and with the rise of technologies like AI and stuff, it's just been easier and easier to trick minds into the easiest way. Like,
Yeah. So
they're
you
all
think this
kind of-
AI and this AI along, I know I've been seeing recently discussions about this chat GBT companion and how dangerous it's been for young minds, that it's led them down conversational paths that have been destructive to themselves. You think that's commonly understood by your generation, that this is dangerous? It could be, it's a tool. It could be very, very good, but it could also be very dangerous depending upon how you use it, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely viewed in very extreme lights. A lot of people I know understand that it's not exactly the best way, like it's not something that should think for them, but it's still used anyway a lot of the times. And yeah, like you said, it is a tool that can be used for good and for bad. I don't think a lot of people understand that, because I've noticed that some are very resistant to AI and they don't want to even open it, while others are like literally depending on it with every aspect of their being. And so if we could find some middle ground and some way to use and harness this, like, it's a very powerful tool. It combines like information from everything we know. If we could find a way to like use this like in effectively, then it could propel us forward. But right now, it doesn't seem.
I agree with that. I completely agree with you. I think it has an opportunity to enslave some people while propelling others into doing great works. And I think it really depends on the mind of the individual that's involved with it and how grounded we are as people to understand ourselves. You're a very grounded young woman. You're intelligent. You're capable. I've had the occasion to chat with you with groups of adults around, and frankly, you make more sense than a lot of the adults I was talking to. But you're a very grounded person, and you have the ability to see reality in certain things rather than be confused into just following. You're a thinker. You think for yourself, and I admire that greatly. And that's why I invited you to be on the show as a representative of your generation. Because all too often people see things in the media and it says this generation is this, or this, they're rebellious, or they don't want to conform, or all these things. And they don't recognize that they're human beings they're talking about, with those qualities that are good and those qualities that may not be quite as good or haven't been shaped yet. They're still emerging. Your mind, thankfully, is going to continue to grow exponentially over the next few years. You're going to bloom into a bigger, brighter, more intelligent person than you are today, even though you're intelligent today. Because of your experience and your ability to learn, you're going to become something bigger than you are now. And if you control what you intake through education, through AI, through experiences with family values, attending church, all those things will help to shape and mold you and grow you into a bigger person. And if you're smart enough to use it, and I think you are, you're going to be quite a remarkable person as you go forward.
Thank you. Yeah.
So what do you think your generation feels? I know that I've seen some things regarding to what's been labeled a revival as a result of the passing of Charlie Kirk. I know everybody knows that was a terrible thing that happened. But there's been a wholesale recognition that change is in the air. People are changing. They're coming back to faith. They're coming back to Americanism. They're coming back to patriotism. Do you find that in your generation is something you guys talk about? Is it something you adhere to? Or is it something that you just leave on the side at the moment?
Yeah, thankfully, I go to a Christian school, so it's generally talked about there. Although I have noticed that there is commotion and there is change in the younger generation, especially with, like what you said, the whole Charlie Kirk thing. And they're also sick of being fed just stuff. I mean, like a lot of people are kind of just, I don't know, they're sick of being just stereotyped. And yeah. Also, I have a question. When you say Gen Alpha, what exact time period do you mean? Because there's a lot of definitions.
Gen Alpha are people who were born from 2010 to 2024. A Gen Alpha. Prior to that, from 1997 to 2010, a Gen Zs. That's what my cheat sheet says.
Okay, yeah. There's like a lot of different.
I looked it up on this program called Perplexity, which is an AI program, and it identifies the things that you research and find out. For one of the things that we're talking about today, I said during one of my programs that when America was founded and there were only 13 colonies, there were 2.1 million people in the United States, of what became the United States. Now, 250 years later, as we come to our birthday, 250 years of America, there are 349 million people in the United States. So it's a vastness in growth. I wanted to get those numbers correctly, so I went on this program called Perplexity and AI to tell me if it was correct or not. So that's what I use.
Yeah, that's good. And that's one example of using AI in an effective, good way.
Yeah, I think so. Rather than say something that's not correct or say something that I've overheard in hyperbole somewhere and I'm assuming it's correct because somebody else said it, I research it to know that it's all right.
That's actually similar to how I've noticed younger people tend to, so humans in general are kind of like we like to be with other humans, of course, but
Good.
But there are also certain echo chambers that can emerge, and a lot of information can be not correct, but said over and over again to the point, and like new truths are being invented. And like, if you just go on forums like Reddit or something, you're gonna notice they're all kind of talking about, like, they're all chattering about the same thing. And when there's a new like opinion, then that kind of, if it's not approved, then it just gets shut down. And I feel like that's one major reason why a lot of younger people kind of lean towards one side versus, it's not as, while we kind of praise ourselves, like I've noticed that a lot of people that are younger are said to be more like diverse and tolerant and all that. But when it comes to ideas, I don't think we really are, because we are, but it's not as grand as it's said to be. Does that make sense?
I think every generation, whether it's you at 14 or myself at 84, there's 70 years between us. Okay. Every generation has a tendency to like to associate and surround themselves with people that are like them, think like them, so that there's less friction in life, And if we think the same way, we're kind of amenable to each other. It's when we start to think differently that people start to scratch at each other. And I think that's a shame when we allow that to separate us from being around diversity and other people. Because if we don't learn through our discussions, we don't learn at all. We get put into a category and we become this cabbage patch that just feeds on that same thing over and over again. And that's not how we grow. We grow by being interested in each other's points of view, being tolerant and respectful if they're different, and learning to discuss them rather than fight about them. The problem that we have in America today, too many people are fighting about different issues rather than discussing them. They don't get a chance to understand the value that the other person sees and what they see. You only have to look at it through their mind. Have you ever seen people, they're in a conversation and one person is talking and before they're even finished with the sentence, the other one is answering the sentence in a different way, didn't even take the time to absorb in what the person was saying before they debated it? Because they're protecting their point of view rather than being open to listen.
Exactly. And I've also found it really hard to find someone that can engage in conversation that is just like mentally stimulating, if you know what that means. Since
Yeah, I absolutely do. I absolutely do. I think it's important that we never stop growing and we get involved with people who can have conversations that are more than mundane. How long can you talk about the mimes? How long can you talk about the weather? You have to be able to recognize that there are deeper issues in life, that if you don't begin to discuss them and analyze them and explore them, they become this mystique off in the future that you don't learn, you don't experience, and you don't get to learn anything from it because it's all the way out there and nobody touches it. It's not what life is supposed to be. Life is supposed to be, my impression of life is you come across a pond in the forest and it's stagnant. And somebody picks up a pebble and they throw it in the middle and it makes rings on rings on rings. That's what life is. We reach out and we touch other people as we expand and we explore and we talk and we learn. And you never know where those rings are going to go because they have enlightened us into something more. I think God gave us this magnificent brain, this ability to have wonderment and to want to know more about things. And He's also given us a Bible with tried and true traditions, rules to follow. But as we're following that, He doesn't want us to be lemmings to just blindly follow other people. He doesn't want us to be, frogs on a log. He wants us to learn. He wants us to expand. And I think that's part of the great joys in life. We're having a conversation now that I didn't anticipate having to this extent, but I'm so glad we're doing it because we're recording it and it's going to be part of the show. I'm so glad we're doing this because this is exactly why I wanted to do this show, to let people hear voices through time that we can explain, we can reach out, we can communicate with each other beyond our sphere influence, that we can learn from one another. And that's why I wanted this program.
That's I love that concept because it's just like you're never really going to be able to progress and expand if you don't allow perspectives and ideas. Like, in order to go beyond what you have to interact and learn from other things. And
absolutely,
I think,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's great.
I told my kids while they were growing up, you must be willing to turn around and go out in life. I used to take them traveling with me all over Europe and different places. And they said, where are we going to go for dinner, Dad? I said, what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to walk 4 blocks away from the main street where all the tourists are. And then we're going to walk up to a door and we're going to listen. If we hear any English in there, we're not going in. If we hear the language of the country we're in and we smell good food coming out, we're going to go in, because that's how you learn, by experiencing new things and going other places. I think it's essential that we do such things. I think we have to learn.
Yeah. Like, my mom's from Bolivia and we go there every other year. And that would actually be something really interesting to do. Just like kind of, that's cool.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to say anything you want to say to anyone.
All right. Think for yourself about everything, whether that's just everyday matters, or like everyday things, or faith, or just process it and look beyond what you know. Is that?
Great advice. Great advice. Ladies and gentlemen, as you're watching this show, I said a moment ago, this is the last interview in this series. And I think it's a bright interview. And I want you to recognize that what I see here, an intelligent, beautiful young woman who has intellect, sensitivity, and willingness to have an open mind to learn. So the future is okay. We just have to nurture these young people. We have to give them opportunity to learn and to grow and influence our world, because they are going to be our future. They will mold this world into a place we can't even conceive of at this point. When I was a young person her age, planes had props. There were no jets. We sat around TV or radio stations because there were no televisions in the house. And look at how the world has changed since then. Imagine what they are going to change this world to be. It's going to be magnificent. Magnificent. So I thank you for being part of our show. And I tell you, I'm going to tell you what I tell everybody every time they come on our show. You tell your story, tell it wide and far, because you have something to give to this world. And thank you for being part of this today, being part of it. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you in every show, every time I close a show, I tell you this. Get somebody you know today, grab them in a big bear hug, tell them you love them. Tell them you love them, because it may be the only time they hear those words. And I'm quite sure God loves them too. He loves you. He loves Luisa, obviously, because he's given us so much to build on. He loves me, and he loves this great generation that we've been talking about here today. Thank you for participating. You've been watching Luisa Pastorek, and she is the youngest in our interviewers. She's 14 years old. The first who started this program was 85 years old, and the last is 14. But that's the future with this 14-year-old lady. Thank you for joining us. Luisa, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for the last 3 episodes in which we talked about generational wisdom. And we were talking here about a period of time that's almost 100 years long. People of different generations came on this show and we told you about the things that they witnessed and experienced and how it changed their lives. How many things have been consequential to them. Some of those things were kind of the same from generation to generation. I hope you notice that. Many things have changed in the last 100 years. Some things have turned around completely. Some things have ebbed and awed and came back again. Like people participating in different faith efforts and different educational programs. Much has changed. Technology has changed the world enormously over this last 100 years. And our most recent generations told us about the technological changes that helped to shape and form their lives and what's become day-to-day activities for them. And those of us who were in the silent generation or the baby boomers could only dream of those kinds of things. They were futuristic. And today they're commonplace. But, we're talking about a group of people, tens of millions of people, almost hundreds of million people over that period of time that have come and gone. We've had, I don't know how many, 8 or 10 different people interviewed on these different programs. And there were people just like you and me. They were reminiscents of their grandparents and parents and children and all those along the line that have helped to shape them and mold them into who they are. And the one thing that seems very clear to me, and I hope it's clear to you also, that while things change, much stays the same. People still seek to make a better life for themselves. People still seek to have improvements in their daily lives. People love their families. People come and go over various times, moving to different places and locations. Some people from my generation never moved from a particular place they lived in, and all their families surrounded them, and their jobs left them in one place. And yet we have the current generations who move cross-country and internationally for jobs. And they take their families with them, or they form new families. And that's part of life, isn't it? That's the way life goes on in our societies that change so frequently. We heard about how people were impacted by fashion and others were impacted by music. Still others were impacted by the need and the urgency to overturn things that they thought were wrong about the government and about what's going on in our country at different periods of time. We've seen people who have lived through depressions and wars, numerous wars, and recessions, and regrowth, and revitalization, and renewal, and expansion of technology, and with technology, man's capability to reach and go beyond. That just goes to prove that we are all human beings, regardless of what generation we belong to. We bleed when we're cut, we pain when we lose someone, and we smile and rejoice when we meet new people and new loves in our lives, or new babies are born. What a wonderful thing. New babies being born, new generations. I'd love to hear your comments. Please write in. Tell us what you think. Make your comments below. And let us know if you'd like to see other types of examinations of life in this fashion. Perhaps another series that you would recommend in another venue that we would focus on and dive deep into as we did with this one. And I'm sure many of you will come out and help us like you did this time around. So thank you for participating in this experiment, in this extensive examination of many different generations over 100-year period of time. Thank you so much. May God be with you. Bye.